Hello and welcome to this final session of the first day of the Economist Ocean Summit. I am Hal Hodson, I am our Asia Technology Correspondent, and we are going to do a little Q&A wrap-up of the session today. And we're very lucky to be joined by Eric Schwaab from the Environmental Defence Fund. Welcome, Eric. And by Jenny Barker from SALT, the Seafood Alliance for Traceability. And Eric, you've heard from today. Jenny, you will hear from later in the week. And we're just going to get straight to it with some questions. But if you are watching and you have a question, please start typing it right now in the chat box on your screen and we will pick it up. Right now, we're going to start with a couple of questions that came in earlier in the day. And let's go straight to you, Jenny. This one comes in on the sustainability question and asks, what are the best consumer-driven approaches to solving sustainability and ethical problems in seafood and aquaculture? And I guess with your data hat on for us, please.
Great, thanks, Hal. Glad to be here with you today. I work with FishWise, which is an organization that has been working with businesses for more than 15 years. And we have worked with businesses to sort of navigate all aspects of sustainable seafood. And I think it's important to recognize here, and I think many of the panelists earlier today noted, that we have a more holistic definition of what sustainability means. And for us, that means that we have to look at the environmental and social aspects, and as well as the sort of economic aspects of any issues related in seafood supply chains. And so some of the things we've seen be successful are kind of public commitments and communicating to consumers what your purchasing policies are, what your commitments to transparency are, and letting them know that as a retailer or as a business that is important to you and that you want to deliver accurate information to your customers as well. We also think it's really important to do and gather that data that you discussed through either environmental risk assessments or human rights risk assessments. So some of the information that you're sharing is based on strong data, and you can communicate clearly to the different consumers that you're working with why you're ethically and sustainably sourcing the seafood that you are.
Okay, excellent. Well, we may come back to that general theme. I suspect that we will, depending on the questions that come in. But Eric, I'd like to turn to you for this next one, which is broadly on kind of the theme of clashing rights. And the questioner asks, on the theme of human rights in the fishing industry, how do you suggest that corporations enact human rights policies that may contradict local and national laws in countries across the globe? How do you deal with that tension, Eric?
Well, I would say that human rights are certainly fundamental to a good sustainable fisheries system. So, you know, the healthy, law-abiding fisheries are the ones that are also attending to human rights. So the corporations need to focus on, if they focus on sustainable fisheries policies, if they focus on effective transparency and full participation in legal systems, then I think human rights will fall naturally through that process. I think the failure to depend upon healthy, law-abiding, transparent fisheries opens the door to the kinds of human rights abuses that we see in the more sort of illegal fisheries that are out there as part of the problem.
Okay, gotcha. And Jenny, I actually want to hear from you a little bit on this as well, just from maybe the more technical perspective. When you're thinking of standards for moving data around within the industry, maybe between one set of fisher folk and another, do those ever clash? Do you ever get conflict and failure to agree on standards, or just disagreements about who's using what system?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a really important question. And I thought the interesting part of this is this idea that different jurisdictions obviously do have different rules and regulations. And it's something with the Seafood Alliance for Legality and Traceability, SALT, the work I lead, when we look at how do you comprehensively use traceability as a tool to combat issues of illegality and in particular human rights abuses in supply chains, what are those data points you're collecting within a supply chain? So are you seeing data points around time at sea or a transshipment data point, right, which could indicate it could identify a risk of there being forced labor in that supply chain? Or you look at the data from the environmental side of where the catch is happening. Is that important data for governments to have in order to do better stock assessments? Just one other thing I'll say is at FishWise, we have developed this roadmap for improved seafood ethics, which is called RISE. It is directly targeted at industry to kind of answer this question. How do we navigate this space? What are the priority areas? We look at the concepts of responsible recruitment, worker engagement, decent work at sea, and how do you get that information to companies or have companies ask for that information in order to root out the risk of human rights abuses in your supply chain.
Okay, gotcha. And this next one's kind of related, and maybe let's start by going straight back to you, Jenny. It's basically asking for examples of innovative approaches to support sustainability, that are both, I guess, doing that, but also educating and training local communities and feeding into their own food supply. So kind of just examples of innovation that is doing both kind of global sustainable fishing practices, but also helping on local levels with education, training, and sustainability on that level too. Any examples from your networks that you can tell us about?
Yes, and I'm sure Eric is going to have a lot to share on this as well. But in particular, I think we advocate really strongly for participation of local stakeholders in any process. So part of when we say, if you go to design a traceability system, you don't start with the technology, right? You start with the people in a supply chain, the stakeholders who are part of it and who need to understand, comply with, input the data. So you have to start with a broad group of those people who are affected by the system you're trying to implement to get their inputs and into design. And I think we've seen some really interesting examples in the Philippines or in Indonesia where there's a lot more consultation kind of at that local level that should feed into and it help to address some of the global issues that we're seeing.
And Eric, just the same question to you. I don't mean to pigeonhole Jenny as the tech person and you as the policy person. So, any specific examples that you're excited about or paying attention to would be great to hear.
Well, I think Jenny is exactly right. And it starts with people in communities first. Obviously, the systems vary dramatically from the large industrialized nations to the small scale fishers that we deal with. But one of the things that we see commonly throughout both of those systems is the value of rights-based approaches, tenure rights where allocations are assigned directly to individual participants in the system. Now, in some remote communities, those can be tenure rights, area-based management that allows them control. We have a number of tools then that are made available to help particularly small-scale fisheries in data-limited circumstances to design management systems that are effective for them locally. We have a fishy toolbox, which is a framework that is available to small-scale fishers around the globe. They can pick up, they can help to design local management systems, they can adapt management systems that take advantage of whatever limited data might be available, and then set reference points to ensure sustainable management as they go forward. Those kinds of systems can be very helpful.
Gotcha. The next one is kind of connected, but it's maybe coming at us from the other side, and it's about food security. It's kind of the same question from the exact opposite angle, which is like, what kinds of tools are out there? In what ways are local communities being supported for food security, kind of sustainability aside? Are there maybe the answer is to some extent that these tools do both. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, Eric, about how do you support food security locally?
Well, one of the things, thanks, Hal. One of the things that we know is that a healthy community is a food secure community, and a food secure community is the only way to ensure sustainable fisheries locally. So we have to provide the kind of tools that we talked about to ensure that fishers are meeting their immediate needs if they are ever going to be in a position to ensure long-term sustainability of the system. Now, this brings into play something that we mentioned earlier, and that is climate affected changes in ocean systems. One of the things that's very clear is that tropical zones, places where some of the most fishery dependent communities exist, are most vulnerable to shifts in productivity and distribution of fishes that they depend upon. So we are increasingly looking to provide them tools to anticipate what may come in relation to climate change, provide for diversified economic opportunities to move beyond their traditional dependence on a particular set of fishes that they have relied on in the past. Diversify into other ocean-based economic opportunities, marine aquaculture, tourism-related opportunities, perhaps payments for ecosystem services that might emerge. All of these things can come together to help communities that are most dependent on ocean systems to be food secure into the future.
Great. So, yeah, Jenny, just on the food security question, I mean, it seems to me that the only way to solve this very broad problem globally is to align the means of both local and global communities. If you can't do that, if you can't find ways to, or sorry, not the means, the ends, the goals, the things that people need, if you can't find ways to overlap those ends and find places where they meet, then you're not going to succeed at this, because people have to eat, people have to live their lives. And so maybe there's a higher level thought that you could give us about the role that technology plays in, or can play in doing that, or maybe the role that it shouldn't play.
Yes, and I think that's part of why we decided through SALT, when we did the idea, when you decide you want to use traceability as a tool to help combat IUU fishing and the illegal behavior associated with it, we decided that it was really important to focus on what we call producer country governments. And for us in particular, we mean those governments in the developing world, because we're partnered with USAID and the Walton Family Packard and Moore Foundations. That's where they work. And so when you think about a tool that really is meant to serve the countries where these coastal fishing communities we're talking about, right, are operating, where they're fishing, how do we support those governments to use this data from traceability systems to enhance their fisheries management, right? How do you make it so all of this data just isn't exported for a company to a country where it's trying to sell its product? How is that data used to support those communities in those countries where the product is being sourced? And thus, how is it able to improve the management of those fisheries? And so I do think that the idea that you kind of start at the source, and what we're advocating for is that collection of data at the source, figuring out how you can support people at the source in order to give that data and start that data as it goes down the supply chain, is intended to reap the rewards back in the countries and communities where the product started.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Eric, we've got one here specifically for you, which is, Eric, how can we help the artisan fishermen in Somalia to prevent future pirates and organized crime without using a reprisal solution alone?
So it starts with a good, effective local management system that is fair to those artisanal fisheries. So one of the things that we see around the globe is where there's co-occurrence of industrial fishers and artisanal fisheries, that you have to start with a good foundation of allocation system between the two that is fair and equitable. Then you have to enforce that system. And I think one of the things that you see in a lot of these circumstances is lack of enforcement capacity. And we've talked a lot over the course of the day about different tools that are available for enforcement, remotely sensed data like what we get from Global Fishing Watch, boat-based assessments through electronic monitoring and video technology that is becoming increasingly available in conjunction with human observers where appropriate. And then finally, good, strong reporting in port. So the triangulation across those three systems can maximize the transparency and can maximize the protections that are afforded to artisanal fishers, but only where you have a good, strong foundational management system with appropriate allocations in place up front. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of what the theme we were just on before that question. And it seems to me that unless you help people locally, unless you provide positive incentives, then all you're left with is a reprisal system. That's the only way you have of governing globally according to these global needs, is effectively coercion. And that, probably isn't very good at the end of the day. Anyway, well, actually, Jenny, do you have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts to add on that? I mean, maybe not the Somalian pirates specifically, but no. Okay, let's keep going. We got a good few to get through here. We've got a question here about whistleblower protection, and I'll read the whole thing out. The US has very robust whistleblower protection and reward laws with international scope and reach that is applicable to fisheries. EU members are in the process of implementing a new whistleblower protection law. Please provide your thoughts on incorporating whistleblowers into promoting legality of fisheries supply chains. I don't know which one of you is the greater expert on whistleblowing, so maybe just jump in, whichever one wants to go first.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have seen it become more of a topic at the forefront as a tool that could be used in illegal fishing. And intuitively, it makes sense because a lot of what is happening on the high seas is only seen by a few people who are there. So there is not a lot of transparency of what's happening, even from the really important satellite data we have, but you're not seeing individually what's happening on boats very often. At the same point, these are usually some of the most vulnerable people globally, and in particular whenever they are on a boat, right, in those situations, and understanding that not all countries do have those protections. So the U.S. and the EU may have strong protections, but other countries don't. So without being an expert, those are kind of my thoughts about how we would need to balance, obviously, the protection of these almost extra vulnerable people who are on boats who might be trying to report this, but with the necessary information that they have.
Eric, what do you think without getting into who's the bigger expert competition?
Well, I'm not an expert on whistleblower protections either. I think what Jenny just outlined is exactly right. I don't think that I would add anything more technically supportive than that.
Okay, great. Let us move on. And we've got another one come in specifically for Jenny this time, which goes back to our fishers from developing regions, and it asks, how would you recommend that they adopt traceability with limited financial means?
It's an incredibly important question, and I think Eric might have some insights as well. It is something that we have not perfected by any stretch of the imagination, and it's something that we continue to strive to understand better. We've seen certain incentive schemes linked to cash payments, obviously, for support of and putting in data into systems. We've seen programs where the traceability systems are subsidized for local fishers, and then it's really incentivizing that data collection for accuracy. I think there are roles for international development organizations like USAID and other international bodies who support that sort of initial investment in those developing regions, and then support the training to do the traceability work. And then we've seen some data out of Indonesia in particular. There was a cost-benefit analysis that showed that there may have been some upfront investment required by foundations or other international development agencies, but after a time, whether it was the return on investment from more efficient paths, and so there was a reduction in fuel costs, to other sort of value-based, they really did determine that there is a return on investment within, I want to say it was 8 months to a year. getting a system. And so I think we really just have to take those and learn from them and then apply those learnings when we can to different situations. But there is no one size fits all approach, and there is no easy answer to that. You kind of have to take it case by case and take what's worked in other places.
What do you think, Eric? What's your no easy answer to that?
So I would add a couple of things. One is we know that fisheries supply chains are among, if not the most complicated supply chains in the world. Anything that we can do to shorten supply chains is going to fundamentally improve that situation. The other thing that I would add is that we have seen investment in local facilities like processing plants, like cooler systems, like shared centralized markets that can help to improve the power structure for artisanal fishers and on behalf in aggregate of a group in all ways that allow them to compete more effectively in a shorter supply chain in global markets.
Okay, gotcha. And another one that is directly connected to this again is, do we kind of have enough tools at this point for this sort of stuff? Are the problems ahead of this industry when it comes to sustainability? Are they about building more tools, or are they about something else? Maybe they're more along the lines of what we've just been saying about incentivization. What do you think? Jenny, let's go with you first.
Okay, I think I heard that about, do we have enough tools? I think that there are people who would argue that there are a lot of tools that exist. The approach that we took, in particular with salt, was not that there needed to be a bunch of new tools developed, but it was that we needed to bring all of the tools that had been developed together in a kind of coherent space and identify which ones work best in which situation. So that may feel like another tool, but it really is meant to be an aggregate set of information of the best information we have in order to allow us to act on the best information that we have. And so I think in places where it feels like there's a lot of tools, there's still not always a lot of coherence to the space. And bringing coherence to the space is still something that I think there's value in us doing. And I do think that there are some places, as we've said, they're around that, and how do you incentivize, people at the local level to change behavior and to do things differently. There's always something to learn there. There are always ways you could probably do that better. And that may be new tools or maybe existing tools applied more consistently. But I think that bringing some coherence to the space and kind of elevating the tools that are working is still a really valuable exercise.
Okay, and my sound might have gone a little weird, but if you can't hear me, Eric, let me know and I'll jump in and out again. But have you got any thoughts to tack on?
Yeah, you're sounding good right now, Hal.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would say there are a lot of tools. We have to increase their use. We have to make them useful to people in low data environments, in low technology environments. There are a lot of technologies that can be made more available, can be made more cost effective, even in reduced or in cost challenged places. The other thing that I would say that we need is, and it goes back to the point that I made earlier, we need stronger predictive capacities, and we need to have tools that look forward, not backward. And as we see climate-driven challenges around the world, we know there are places that are already collaborating around early predictive capacities associated with changing ocean conditions and what those might do to shifting fish stocks around the world. So we're working in Chile and Peru on an early warning system that is detecting changes in ocean conditions and allowing both artisanal fishers and industrial fishers to respond to what that might mean for availability of fish stocks in any given point at any given point in time.
Okay, cool. And we've got a sort of follow on from that, which hopefully is from the same muckraking tool interested fisher questionnaire, which is basically if there are enough tools, why isn't everybody using them? A lot of fisheries seem really slow at best to record data and share it. I think this is going to touch on some of the stuff we've talked about with incentivization, but maybe let me tack on a little sort of end bit of my own, which is that I guess I wonder whether the tools are always coming from the right places. You know, that adoption is often driven by, as we've said before, benefit, and it seems to me sometimes like the tools are coming not necessarily from businesses that want to sell you a thing to make you more money or, you know, make your fishing experience better, but from, you know, folks that have other interests, perfectly valid interests, but just other ones.
Hal, let me give a plug for a new tool that just came out.
Yes, please.
And it's not just an EDF tool, but it's one that we've collaborated on, and it's a small scale fishers hub, and it's ssfhub.org. It is available today in 20 different languages. It has a translation capacity that allows fishers from one part of the world to talk to fishers from another part of the world. It provides a lot of tools, it provides experiences, it provides chat opportunities to exchange ideas laterally as opposed to up and down. And we think that's going to be a really a very important tool available to local fishers around the world as it continues to evolve. And it literally just came out. There were many partners involved, both global and local, and we're really excited about it.
Cool. That sounds cool. Jenny, would you like to plug a tool?
Certainly, and congratulations on that. And I think part of the answer to that question is what Eric just referenced, which is you don't design it in isolation. You don't design it because you think it solves one specific need. You design things with the communities that they're intended to serve. And so that is what we've done with these principles that I was talking about. We sort of launched these principles of how would you do traceability effectively and what are the steps you can take to do it. And again, that is referencing existing important tools and information. But I think part of what you're hearing from us is we recognize uptake is slow. Maybe there's a lot of information out there. How are we clarifying and bringing those information together kind of in ways that allow people to act on it more concretely? Sometimes information obviously just isn't enough to sort of get to the next level. That knowledge needs to be taken in and then applied in the context. And so more of these tools showing what application looks like, I think will be really beneficial to address that in action.
Excellent. Well, look, we have torn through a straight half hour of internet time, so I've got to wrap it up. Only thing to say is thank you very much, Eric and Jenny, for a fascinating conversation. Could have talked about all of that for a lot longer. And thank you very much to all the viewers. And best of luck with the rest of the week. Thank you all very much.